We're going to talk about guidance. Guidance. Many of us need guidance. You know, there was a quote I heard about a long time ago. I think it was John Wimber, some guy. And he basically said, you don't need a radar system unless you're in flight. Okay? You don't need a radar system unless you're in flight. And sometimes we spend a lot of times working on the radar, but we actually never take off. Am I making sense? So what I want to talk about this morning through the book of Nehemiah, and Mike Ingalls will continue on next week, is about getting our guidance systems going, yes, but getting in flight. So we can actually use the guidance system that God has given us through all the study and the word and the worship that we do. So getting the big picture, that's what we're going to talk about this morning. I have a quote here that I really love. It says, everyone ends up somewhere in life. Everyone ends up somewhere in life. A few people end up somewhere on purpose. Those are the ones with vision. Let me read that again. It's quite good. Everyone ends up somewhere in life. A few people end up somewhere on purpose. Those are the ones with vision. Amen? That's good. And that can take some time to discover, can't it? You know, I talk to many people, and you know, we're always talking about vision. What's God want me to do in my life? What's going on? Where should I go? So on and so forth. Now, there's something to understand with vision and getting the big picture, and it's simply this: we all have phases in life. We all have transitional periods in life. But the key is when you're not in a transitional period is that you're living with vision that God's given you and focus. Amen? So we're going to talk about Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah was an amazing man. He had an amazing gift for vision. He had an amazing gift for administration. He was a man of honor. He was a man of integrity. He was a man of humility. He was a man of faith. And he was a man of focus. He was a warrior. He would stand up to opposition. But also, let's not forget this. He was a slave to the king. He was a slave to the king. And in some ways, he really had no power. He had no voice. As a servant to the king, he brought the food. He tasted the food. So if somebody tried to poison the food, he would die first. Okay? So he wasn't a man of high standing. He was an educated man, but he was an educated man in the sense of how he educated himself. So this was who Nehemiah was. And I think that gives us hope, doesn't it? Because sometimes we feel like we don't have a voice. Sometimes we feel like, how could God use us? Sometimes we feel inadequate. Sometimes we feel like we're lost and just kind of walking in the dark looking for the flashlight. Well, Nehemiah wasn't a man of standing, but he became what God was calling him to become. He had a guidance system, and he realized and got a big picture. And today, what we need in our society, what we need in this church, what we need in Christianity as a whole, is we need men and women who are willing to hear the call of God and stand up and lead in whatever fashion God has called you to do. Because I really believe we need to rebuild our community, the one we sit in today. That we need to rebuild LA. That we need to bring the cultures and the ethnicities and the nations together. That we here need to stand up and do that which God has called us to do. Amen? And I think last night was a beautiful night. We did the fundraiser for Community's Child, and it was labeled Living a Dream. And I had a few people stand up and share what their dream was and how God was helping them connect to their dream and how this community was helping them take us each a step closer. And so that's what Nehemiah did. So I'm going to read in Nehemiah. I don't know if it's there because I think I forgot to give it to Crystal, but I'll read it. And you understand now, Nehemiah right here, he's still a slave. And some of his friends from the Jerusalem come, and it says this: one of my brothers came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. So Nehemiah is asking. And they said to me, Those who survive the exile are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have burned with fire. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Let me read that again. I think it's important. Those who survive the exile are back in the province, are in great trouble and in disgrace. His people are in disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down. They have no protection. They have no security. And its gates have been burned with fire. Then Nehemiah says, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and I fasted and I prayed before the God of heaven. It was at this moment in time Nehemiah began to get the big picture of what God was calling him to do. So this morning we want to talk about getting the big picture in life and learning how to nurture it, communicate it, and live by it. Nurture it, communicate it, and live by it. And when God is starting to give you a vision, if you leave one of these components out, your vision will either stay and not move forward, or just kind of begin to dissipate. And then what will happen is you'll create a new vision.